This is the story of Hannah, a poor woman, and Dominic, a billionaire. One was hungry and cold, the other had everything money could buy. But one rainy morning in Lagos, their lives crossed in an unexpected way, and what happened after will make you cry. It was a cold morning. The rain fell slowly. Cars rushed past on the busy Lagos road. Hannah stood at the corner, holding her baby, Julia, close to her chest. The baby was wrapped in a The baby was wrapped in a thin Frito. The baby was wrapped in a thi. Her face was wet. Hannah had no umbrella, no jacket, no food, no home. Her slippers were torn. Her dress was soaked. But she did not move. She could not move. Last night, she and her baby had nothing to eat, not even a spoonful of food. So this morning, even though the rain was falling, she was ready to stand by the roadside until someone helped. It wasn't because she wanted the food so badly for herself, but because her baby was hungry. People walked past. Some looked at her with pity, while others looked away. Two men stood near her and whispered, "Why is she standing there in the rain?" "Maybe it's her job," the other man said. "A lot of people pretend just to get free money. Some even go as far as renting a baby to attract pity." Hannah heard them, but she said nothing. She just wiped Julia's face and rocked her gently. Hannah stretched out her hand. Her voice was soft, tired, but full of pain. "Please help me. Just a little food for my baby. She hasn't eaten. Please." She looked down at Julia's face. The baby's lips were dry, and her cry was weak. Hannah held her tighter. "Don't worry, my baby. Mommy will find food today. Even if I have to stand here all day, help will come." But Hannah did not know that help was closer than she thought. Inside a black Jeep, a man sat in the back seat. His name was Dominic, and he was very rich, the kind of rich that made people look twice when he walked by. Today, he was going to his office very early. He had a big meeting with some foreign people who wanted to work with his company. This meeting was very important. It could help his company grow and bring more business from different upbringings. The road was busy, and the cars were moving slowly. It was the usual Lego traffic. Dominic leaned back in his seat and looked out the window. Then something caught his eye. He sat up. A young woman was standing by the roadside holding a baby. The rain was still falling, not too heavy, but steady enough to soak someone. The baby was already wet. The woman looked tired, worn out, almost like she had no strength left. Dominic's eyes stayed on her. He saw how she held the baby tightly, like that child was the only thing she had left in the world. She wasn't moving, shouting, or doing anything else. She just stood there, quietly asking for help. Dominic felt something deep inside. He knew this wasn't ordinary. A person begging with a little baby in the rain? This was pain, real pain. He looked at her again, and then he made a decision. "Stop the car," Dominic said to the driver. "Look," Dominic said to the driver. "Look," Dominic said to the driver. "Look, look," Dominic said to the driver. "Look," Dominic said to the driver. "Look, Dominic, look, baby." The driver pulled over and stopped the car. Dominic opened the door and stepped into the rain. His shoes touched the wet road and his suit began to get wet, but he didn't care. He walked slowly toward the woman. Hannah didn't notice him. She was busy rocking her baby, Julia. The baby was still crying softly and tiredly. Dominic stood in front of her. Hannah looked up and was surprised to see a tall man standing so close. She looked at his face. Deliberately at his face. "Good morning," Dominic said gently. Hannah said nothing. She only nodded. He looked at the baby. "What's her name?" "Julia," Hannah replied softly. Dominic stepped closer and looked at Julia's face. She was shaking, and her lips were trembling as she cried quietly. "Has she eaten?" he asked. Hannah shook her head. "No, sir. Not since yesterday." Dominic looked at her soaked clothes. Her hands were freezing from the cold. "And you, have you eaten?" Hannah looked down. "No, sir, but it's okay. I just want to find food for my baby." Dominic stayed quiet for a moment, looking at the mother and child. Then he said, "Come with me." Hannah looked up, confused. "Sir, come. Let me help you." Hannah stood still. She looked at Dominic. She was afraid. She had never spoken to a rich man before. She didn't know what to think, but when she looked into his eyes, she saw that they were calm and kind. She looked down at Julia. The baby was still shaking, and her tiny fingers were cold. Hannah took a deep breath, then nodded slowly. She followed Dominic toward the black car. The driver opened the door, and Hannah stepped in, holding Julia close to her chest. She sat carefully at the edge of the seat, afraid to touch anything. The driver looked at her through the rumba, then through the kicking. The driver looked at her through the Frankton. The driver looked at her through the Raka Longching. She driver looked at her through the Chintu and avoided his gaze. She looked at her baby and kept rocking her gently. Dominic sat quietly. He looked ahead as the car moved, but his mind was full of thoughts. Who was this woman? What had happened to her? How did she end up like this? Inside the car, Dominic picked a small towel from the seat and handed it to Hannah. "Use this to dry the baby," he said. Hannah took the towel quickly. "Thank you, sir," she said, her hand shaking a kepikli. "Thank you, sir," she said, her hand shaking I. Her dress was still wet, and her hair was dripping, but she didn't complain. She was only focused on her baby. "What's your name?" he asked. "Hannah," she replied softly. "Okay, Hannah, where is your home?" Hannah looked down. She didn't speak at first, then said in a low voice, "We sleep on the street, sir." Dominic nodded slowly. He didn't show any shock. He just breathed in and said, "All right, I'll take you somewhere safe." Hannah lay? Hannah, yes, somewhere dry and warm. You and Julia need rest and food. Tears filled Hannah's eyes, but she wiped them quickly. "Thank you, sir. God bless you." Dominic said nothing more. He looked out the window, deep in thought. But Hannah did not know that this was just the beginning. Dominic looked at his watch. He knew he was almost late for the meeting. The foreign representatives might already be waiting at his office. It was an important meeting, one that could affect significant growth in his company. But he looked at Hannah. He looked at her baby, Julia. They were all tired, cold, and hungry. He shook, tired, cold, and hungry. He shook. Dominic looked at his watch. He shook. Dino, Tafigi, they need food first. He told the driver to stop at a small restaurant. They went inside. Dominic didn't care who was watching. He ordered hot rice, fried plantains, chicken, and warm milk for the baby. He asked them to bring water. Hannah sat at the edge of the chair, still holding Julia. Her stomach was turning. She had not eaten in 2 days. When the food came, she looked at Dominic. "Can I eat here, sir?" she asked softly. Dominic nodded. "Here, sir?" she asked softly. Dominic nodded. Hannah bowed her head, placed Julia on her lap, and fed her the warm milk. Then she started eating, slowly at first, as if afraid the food would disappear. Tears rolled down her cheeks as she chewed. Dominic watched in silence, waiting. When she finished, she wiped her mouth with the back of her hand. Then she looked up at Dominic. Her voice was quiet. "Thank you, sir. God bless you, sir." Dominic leaned forward. "Tell me what happened to you, Tell me what happened to you, Tell me what happened to you. Hannah looked down at her baby, then began to speak. "Sir, I don't have anyone in this world. My parents died when I was a little girl. I grew up in an orphanage in Ibadan. Life was hard, very hard. As I grew older, I learned how to survive. I worked in people's houses, cleaning, washing, cooking, anything I could do to survive." She looked at Julia's face and kissed her forehead. "Then one day, I met Jacob. He was a taxi driver in Lagos, but he came from a neighboring country. He was kind, and we became close. We loved each other. After 1 year, he said we would get married." She paused. Dominic was still listening. The restaurant was quiet. "A few months later, I found out I was pregnant. I was scared at first, but when I told Jacob, he was happy. He said he was ready to marry me, but he needed to travel home and tell his family, but he needed to travel home and tell his family, He needed to travel home and tell his family Louisville Ifalia. He said it was their tradition that he must tell his family first before bringing his fiancée home. Her voice broke. That was the last time I saw him. Dominic blinked. He sat up straight. What do you mean? Hannah nodded slowly. He promised to come back in 1 week, but he never came back. His number stopped going. I waited. I cried. I begged his friends, but no one knew anything, or maybe they were just hiding the truth. I don't know. I had no money left. I lost the house I was staying in. No job would take me because of the pregnancy, so I started sleeping outside. I begged for food. She wiped her eyes. Now, Julia is all I have. Dominic's heart was Hass. Dominic's heart was Hass. Dominic's heart was Hass. He looked at the little girl, who was now sleeping peacefully. Then he looked at Hannah. She was still young, still full of hope, but life had treated her terribly. Dominic took a deep breath. He made a quiet promise in his heart. This is not where her story will end. Dominic reached into his pocket and brought out some money. He placed it on the table in front of Hannah. Take this, he said. It will help you. Your baby, for now. Hannah looked at the money. Her hands began to shake. Sir, this is too much, she said quietly. I can't take all of this. Dominic looked her in the eyes. Take it, he said gently. You need it. Hannah looked down at Julia, who was still asleep in her arms. She picked up the money, held it close to her chest, and bowed her head. Thank you, sir. May God bless you. Dominic nodded and smiled a little. Then he looked at his watch. Hey, y'all. The time for his meeting had already passed, and the foreign guests were probably already at his office. He stood up quickly. I have a very important meeting this morning, he said. It will last about 3 hours. He took out a card from his wallet. It was his business card with his name and number on it. He handed it to her. Call me after 3 hours. I will come to wherever you are and take you and your baby to a safe place. Hannah held the card carefully, as if it were gold. She wanted to speak, but something held her back. She didn't have a phone, not even a small one. She looked at Dominic's face. She wanted to tell him, but her lips would at Dominic's face. She wanted to tell him, but her lips would South like your lips would Sibia. She wanted to tell him, but her lips would word the lips would Vathiao, but her lips would Dominic's face. She wanted to tell him, but her lips would Dominic's face. She wanted, now that she had some money, maybe she could pay someone to help her make the call when the time came. Dominic gave her one last look. I'll be waiting for your call, he said. Then he turned and walked out of the restaurant. Hannah sat there, holding Julia with one hand and the business card in the other. For the first time in a long while, she had hope. After sitting in the restaurant for a while, Hannah stood up. She took the business card Dominic had given her, folded it neatly, and slid it into a small pocket sewn inside Julia's tiny clothes. The baby was still sleeping. Hannah touched the pocket to make sure it was safe, then held Julia close to her chest. As she stepped out of the restaurant, her baby's blanket shifted a little. She tried to adjust it without waking Julia. She didn't know that the card had fallen out. It landed on the wet ground near there. By now, the rain had stopped and the sun was peeking out. Hannah walked slowly, then boarded public transportation back to the same place where Dominic had met her. She saw the small shop near the corner where she had begged earlier that morning was empty. The shade was still dry. She sat on the edge of the small wooden bench. She didn't know the card was gone. She thought, I'll wait here until it's time to call. Then I'll pay someone to help me. But now there was no card, no number, nothing. At exactly noon, Dominic stood up from his seat in the meeting room. The foreign guests had just left, and everything had gone well. He should have been smiling, but his mind went elsewhere. He frowned a little, reached into his pocket, and looked at his phone. No missed calls. He looked at the time again. 5 hour. 5 hour. He looked at the time again. 5 hour. 5 hour. Why hasn't she called me? He asked himself. Did she forget? He rubbed his fingers together. Maybe she never planned to call. Maybe she's one of those people who beg for a living. His face grew serious, but she didn't look like that. She looked scared. She looked broken. He remembered how she cried while eating. He remembered how she held her baby close, as if the world were trying to take her away. He sighed deeply. I told her I would take E. 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 Why wouldn't she want that? He stared at his phone again. Still no call. After a while, he placed the phone on his desk and returned to his work. But in his heart, he wasn't at peace. Outside, in another part of the city, Hannah sat quietly in the shade, still waiting, still holding Julia, with no idea that the card was gone. It was lunchtime. Dominic got into his black SUV and sat quietly for a moment. He looked out the window, deep out the window, deep. Then he turned to his driver and said, "Take me to that small restaurant we went to this morning, the one where I took the woman and her baby." The driver nodded and started the engine. As the car moved through the streets of Lego City, Dominic kept looking out. He was hoping, just maybe, that she would still be nearby. He couldn't stop thinking about her. Something didn't feel right. What if she tried to call, but couldn't? What if something happened to her? The questions kept growing in his mind. They got to the restaurant. Dominic quickly stepped out and looked around. His eyes moved from one core. 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 To the right, no sign of Hannah. No sign of the baby. He walked slowly toward the restaurant entrance. His steps were quiet. Just as he reached the door, he saw something on the wet floor. He bent down. There it was, the business card he had given Hannah. It was wet, and the edges were soft from the rain. The words on it were still clear. He picked it up and stared at it. His heart sank. Did she throw this away? He whispered. Or did it fall off without her name? He held the card tightly in his hand, then walked into the restaurant and sat at the same table they had used earlier. A waitress came to him. Good afternoon, sir. What would you like to eat? He looked at her, not smiling. Just give me rice and chicken, he said softly. As the waitress walked away, Dominic leaned back in his chair and placed the wet card on the table. He kept staring at it. In his mind, two voices spoke. One said, she voices spoke. One said, she voices spoke. One said, she needs to, maybe she's still waiting for you. He didn't know which voice to believe, but one thing was clear. He couldn't stop thinking about what the woman's little baby might be going through far away in another part of the city. Hannah was still seated quietly in the shade. Little Julia was still sleeping in her arms. Hannah looked tired, and her eyes were red. At this point, she thought it was the right time to call Mr. Dominic. So she slowly opened the small pocket and opened the small pocket. Her hand stopped, and her heart jumped. It was gone. She searched again, shaking the small clothes and checking her own wrapper. Nothing. She stood up and looked around the ground. Still nothing. Tears filled her eyes. Oh, no, 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 she cried softly. She sat back down, holding Julia close. This is not happening, she whispered. God finally sent someone to help me, someone kind, and now I've lost his card. She wiped her face with her wrapper, but the tears kept falling. Dominic said he would come, for she remembered his voice, his kind eyes, the money he gave her, and the food. Now, there was no way to reach him. She held Julia tighter. I'm so sorry, baby. Mommy lost it. I lost the only chance we had. Her heart was heavy, and her lips were shaking. Suddenly, suddenly, her lips were shaking. Suddenly, maybe it dropped inside the bus she took, or at the restaurant where he took them to eat. She looked up. The bus was long gone, and she had no idea which bus it was, but she remembered the restaurant. She remembered the street and the table inside. She could find it. She stood up, still crying, but with new hope. I must go back. Maybe the card is still there. Maybe someone kept it safe. She wrapped Julia properly on her back and began walking fast down. Let this not be the end of our help. Her feet were tired, and her body was weak, but her heart kept moving. She found a small yellow bus going toward the hill. She climbed in and sat quietly. She didn't speak much, and her eyes stayed on the road. Every stop made her heart beat faster. Finally, the bus stopped at the bus stop close to the restaurant. She got off, looked around, and walked quickly. Would the card still be there? She didn't know, but she was why. She didn't know, but she was Bilby. She didn't know, but she was Spotspowy Smolpadia. She didn't know, but she was beef. Dominic sat quietly in the restaurant, finishing his food. His mind was still on the card. He picked it up, cleaned it with a tissue, and looked at it for a while. He let out a long sigh and stepped out of the restaurant. His driver opened the car door, and Dominic stepped in. "Let's go back to the office," he said. As Dominic's car pulled out from the front of the restaurant, Hannah was just a few steps away. She couldn't see his face through the dodge. She couldn't see his face through the dodge. By the time she reached the restaurant, the car was gone. She stood in front of the door, breathing hard. She walked in slowly, holding her baby to her chest. Looking around, she saw that everything looked the same, but something was missing. She went to the same table where they had eaten that morning. The table was clean, with no card or sign. She bent down and checked under the table, but found nothing. She turned to one of the nearby waitresses and asked. Her voice shook. The waitress looked at her and shook her head. "No, ma'am. We cleaned the whole place. Nothing like that." Hannah's eyes were full of tears. She stepped outside, holding Julia close. Julia had started crying. Hannah tried to calm her, but her own tears were falling too. Her only chance was gone, and she had no idea how close she had been to getting help. She turned and walked away slowly, not knowing that the man she was looking for had just left. She had just left. Not knowing that the man she was looking for had just left. That night, Hannah sat on the cold floor of the unfinished building. It was dark, with no windows, just broken walls and open space. She placed some old clothes on the floor and laid Julia down gently. Julia was already asleep. Her tiny hand rested on Hannah's arm. Hannah sat beside her, staring at the ceiling with tears in her eyes. She whispered, "God, I don't want my child to grow up like this. Please help us." She thought of Dominic, his fit. She thought of Dominic, his fist. She thought of Dominic, his fist. She thought of Dominic, his fist. Then she thought of the card she had lost. She pressed her hands against her chest and sighed deeply. "Maybe I'll never see him again," she said softly. But just before closing her eyes, she made a decision, a quiet but strong one. "I will go back to that spot, the same place he saw me. Maybe, just maybe, he might pass there again." She didn't sleep much. The wind blew through the open space, and mosquitoes bit her arms. Julia cried in the middle of bombs. Julia cried in the middle of Ulo. She cleaned Julia with some water from a small bowl, dressed her up, and brushed her hair gently. She looked at Julia and smiled. "We will be okay. I promise." Hannah wasn't hungry that morning. Dominic had given her enough money to feed them for more than a week. But today wasn't about food. Today was about hope. She left the building and walked down the road with her. Baby on her back, she didn't beg. She just stood in the same spot where Dominic had seen her that first morning, watching, waiting, hoping he would pass this way again. She didn't know, but she was ready to wait as long as it would take. The Sioux? The Sioux? The Sioux. It was a bright and happy morning at Dominic's house. Today was special. His younger brother, Silam, was coming back home after 17 long years. 17 years away in Atlanta. Dominic had been waiting for this day. He didn't go to the office. He had planned everything. He informed the driver early and said, "Please go to the airport. My brother is landing this morning. Make sure you're there on time." "Yes, sir," the driver replied and left quickly. Dominic walked around the house with a smile on his face. He went into the kitchen and spoke with the chef. "Make sure there's fried rice, jollof, grilled chicken, goat meat, and pounded yam. My brother loves pounded yam." The chef smiled. "Don't worry, sir. Everything will be ready before he arrives." Then Dominic picked up his phone and called 3 of his closest friends. "Salem is arriving today." Come over. Let's welcome him." They all agreed to come. Laughter filled the air in the compound. Music played softly in the background. Dominic stood on the balcony and looked out. Joy filled his heart. "This is a good day," he whispered. But far away in the city, Hannah was still standing by the road. Julia was tied to her back. Her eyes were tired, but her heart was strong. She looked at every black SUV that passed. Unfortunately today, the driver had gone with Dominic's nag. Maybe Dominic would pass by again. Maybe today would be the day her life would change. But she didn't know that Dominic was at home, laughing and waiting for his brother. She didn't know that the man she was praying to meet again was not coming out today. Not even close. God, please don't forget me. The day was still young, but the wait at the airport was getting long. Dominic's driver stood by the entrance of the pickup area, holding a small sign that said by the entrance of the pickup area. Soon, a tall man with a wide smile and a trolley full of suitcases came out of the airport. Salem saw the man with the sign that had his name on it and smiled. He walked over. "You must be Dominic's driver." "Yes, sir," the driver said, taking the trolley. As they drove out of the airport, Salem rolled down the window and looked around. This place has really changed," he said. The driver smiled. "Yes, sir. A lot has changed since you last. Yeah." Cars, trucks, buses, tricycles, and bikes filled the air with honking. "Ah, this traffic has started again," Salem laughed and leaned back. "How do you people cope with this chaos?" The driver laughed. "We just have to. This is Lagos, the most populous city in Africa." They both laughed, but just then, as the car moved slowly again, the driver looked ahead. His smile dropped. For a second, there, by the side of the road, a young woman was standing with a baby tied to her back. She looked tired. She was the same woman Dominic had taken to the restaurant with her baby yesterday. She was the same woman he had gone back to the restaurant to look for, the same woman who had given her baby food before eating her straw. Salem noticed the change in his face. "Is something wrong?" Salem asked the driver, who shook his head. "No, sir. It's just this traffic. I don't know what to do. Should I stop? Should I call my boss?" He wasn't sure, so he kept driving, but he kept looking at her in the rearview mirror. Inside, he knew that woman was important. About 19 minutes later, the black SUV drove into Dominic's big mansion. As soon as the car stopped, Salem stepped out and looked around. The house was beautiful, with flowers by the gate. Everything was clean and shiny. Suddenly, the front door opened, and Dominic stepped out with a big brother. Salem laughed and opened his arms. They hugged each other tightly. "You look good," Dominic said, holding his brother's shoulder. "And you look richer," Salem teased. They both laughed. Just then, some of Dominic's close friends came out, too. They shook hands with Salem and welcomed him warmly. There was laughter, smiles, and drinks in hand. But one person wasn't smiling, the driver. He stood quietly beside the car, looking worried. Hey, looking worried. Hey, hey, Han. Hey. He needed to talk, and fast, before the woman left. As everyone began walking into the mansion, the driver followed quietly. He didn't say a word. He just stood by the main door and waited. Soon, Dominic walked toward the kitchen to check on the food. The chef was busy inside, slicing meat and frying. The driver quickly followed behind. "Excuse me, sir," he said in a low voice. Dominic turned around. "Yes, what is it?" The driver took up the prowled beyond. The driver took up public purchase. The driver took up the kitchen around. The driver took up with the heat. Dominic's face changed. "Who? The woman from yesterday, sir? The one with the baby. She was standing at the same spot where you met her before." Dominic went quiet, his eyes looking down as if he were thinking deeply. Then he slowly asked, "Does the woman who threw away my card really want help?" He remembered the rain, how she had covered her baby with her wrap in the rain, and how she had said, My baby didn't eat last night, how she had said. My baby didn't eat last night. My baby didn't eat last night. My baby didn't eat last night. Maybe she didn't throw the card away on purpose. He looked at the driver and said, "Go back to that spot. If she's still there, ask her why she didn't call me. If her reason makes sense, and if her face shows that she really wants help, bring her to me." The driver nodded. "Yes, sir." He turned and walked out quickly. Hannah was still standing by the roadside. She looked tired, and little Julia was quiet in her arms. The sun was hot, and Hannah looked down the road again, searching for any sign of Dominic's car, but there was nothing. She looked at the sky, then at her baby. Her heart began to sink. "It's past 12 already," she said softly. "If he was going to the office like yesterday, he would have passed by now." She looked up again, still hoping, then whispered, "Maybe he didn't go to work today, or maybe he took a different route." She sighed and looked at Julia. Let at Julia. That's Sam. She was just about to turn and walk away when she heard a voice behind her. "Madame?" She stopped and turned quickly. A red SUV had stopped by the roadside, and the window was rolled down. The man inside pointed at her. "Wait," he said. She looked closely. It was Dominic's driver. Her eyes opened wide and her heart jumped. She held Julia tighter as the driver opened the door and stepped out. Hannah took a small step forward. The moment their eyes met, tears filled her eyes. She didn't cry loudly, but the tears were there. She quickly were there. She quickly for there. She quickly I lost the card he gave me yesterday. I looked everywhere. I went back to the restaurant, but it wasn't there. The driver looked at her and saw her tired face, her sweat, and the way she held her baby as if she were holding gold. She wasn't faking it. She wasn't pretending. She looked like a woman who had cried in silence all night. He didn't need to ask anything else. "Please follow me," he said gently. Hannah nodded. He opened the back doors. The driver got in, started the engine, and drove off. As they drove, Hannah looked out the window. She didn't know what was waiting for her at the end of the ride, but she whispered, "Thank you, God, thank you." The red SUV drove into Dominic's compound and stopped at the carport. The driver came down first and gently opened the back door for Hannah. She stepped out slowly, holding Julia close. Her heart was beating fast. She looked up at the big house. It looked like a dream. Everything was beautiful. The driver smiled softly and said, "Come with me." She followed him as they entered the house. The sound of laughter came from the sitting room. IC was there, sitting with his brother, Salem, and a few other guests. They were still talking and laughing, but the moment Dominic looked up and saw Hannah, his smile faded. He stood up slowly. Hannah moved quickly toward him, still holding Julia. She dropped to her knees to greet him, but Dominic rushed to her and held her arms. "No, please," he said. Jam. Everyone turned to look. The room went quiet. No one said a word, but their eyes were full of questions. Dominic didn't explain. He only turned to her and said, "Come with me." He led her away from the sitting room and down the hallway. He opened the door to one of the guest rooms. It was clean and fresh. "Please," he said softly, "take a proper bath. You and your baby, you can rest here." Hannah nodded slowly, still looking around as if she couldn't believe it was real. Dominic left her there and went straight to the kitchen. He called the chef. "There's a woman in the guest room," he said firmly. "Make sure she eats well. Don't delay." "Yes, sir," the chef replied. Later that evening, after everyone had left, Dominic sat in the living room with Salem and Hannah. Hannah looked cleaner now. She had changed into fresh clothes that the mid Watson. Dominic looked at her. "You said you lost the card," he asked gently. Hannah nodded. "Yes, sir. I looked everywhere for it. I even went back to the restaurant, but I didn't see it." She paused, then added, "My phone got bad before I gave birth. I haven't had a phone since then." Salem listened quietly. Dominic had already told him a little about the woman and what happened the day before. Now, seeing her like this, Salem felt something deed. Salem felt something deed. Salem felt something deed. He looked at baby, then at Dominic. Dominic leaned forward. I can't change the past, he said, but I can help your future. Hannah looked at him, speechless. Dominic continued, I want you to think. Is there any business you want to do, anything you're good at, or something you'd like to learn? Tell me, and I'll set it up for you. Hannah blinked. He added, You'll be staying here for now, until I find you a place of your own. Tears rolled down her cheeks, and this time, she didn't try to hide them. She looked at Julia, then at Dominic. Thank you, she whispered. Salem smiled a little and looked at his brother. Dominic simply nodded, but in his heart, he knew he had just made a decision that would change this woman's life forever. A few days later, Dominic walked in, Dominic walked in, Dominic walked in, Dominic walked in. We're going out. Out? She asked, surprised. He nodded. Yes, you and Julia need something important. Soon, they were on the road. Dominic didn't say much, but Hannah held Julia close and looked out the window. She still couldn't believe all this was happening to her. They arrived at a large clothing store. Dominic led them inside. Pick anything you like, he said. Hannah looked at him with wide eyes. Sir, what do you mean? I mean it. You and Julia both deserve it, he smiled. At first, Hannah was shy. She touched some clothes and dropped them again, but Dominic encouraged her. Soon, she picked a few pretty dresses for herself and some nice baby clothes for Julia. When they were done, the cashier packed everything nicely. Dominic paid for everything. Hannah's eyes were full of joy. Thank you, sir, she said. Thank you so much. But Dominic wasn't done yet. Next, they went to a phone shop. He asked the seller to bring a new phone, one that was durable and easy to use. Then, he took her to the telecom outlet where he helped her retrieve her old phone number. Hannah held the phone as if it were gold. God be, God be, God be, God be, God be. Dominic simply smiled. You don't have to say anything. They returned to the mansion. When they stepped inside, Salem was already sitting in the living room, waiting. He stood up as they entered. Dominic, he said, there's a place I want you to go with me, and I'd also like Hannah to come along. Dominic looked at Hannah, who nodded quietly. They all left the house together and entered the car. Nobody said much during the drive. Hannah kept wondering what this was about. She looked at Julia, who was asleep. After some time, the car stopped in front of a tall apartment building. Salem told the driver to park, and then they all got out. Dominic looked at Salem. Where are we? Just follow me, Salem said. They walked into the compound. As they reached the door of one of the apartments, Salem stopped. He turned and looked at Hannah. When I heard your story, he began slowly, it reminded me of our mother. Hannah listened, unsure where he was going with it. Salem's voice became softer. She was a single mother, he said. She raised Dominic and me all by herself. I remember how she used to cry at night. I would see her when I woke up, but I couldn't do anything. We were too small to help her. Hannah's eyes were already wet. Her hands shook as she held Julia tighter. Salem continued. She passed before we made money, before we could show her the love she truly deserved. That pain has never left me. Then Salem reached into his pocket and brought out a small key. This apartment, he said, is for you. Hannah's knees gave way. She dropped to the ground and began to cry loudly. Oh, God, she cried. What did I do to deserve this kindness? Dominic, he was quiet. He looked at Salem, shocked. He had wanted to help Hannah, but now it was his brother who had taken it even further. Dominic walked up to him and hugged him tight. I am proud of the man you've become, he said in a heavy voice. I just wish Mommy was here to see this. Sim held his brother's hand and smiled. Then he turned to Hannah again. I've also made plans to open a supermarket for you, he said. Don't know. With time, you'll learn how to manage it fully by yourself. Hannah cried even more. She didn't know what to say, but in her heart, she knew her life would never be the same again. Weeks passed quietly. Hannah's life had changed in ways she never imagined. She now had a clean house to sleep in, food to eat, and a big supermarket with her name on it. The shelves were full, and customers came in every day. She was no longer B. One warm afternoon, Hannah was in the office of her supermarket, writing down sales and checking her books. Julia, her baby, was sleeping in a small crib beside her. Suddenly, her phone rang. It was an unfamiliar number. She stared at the screen for a moment, unsure whether to answer. Something told her to pick up the call. She pressed the green button and held the phone to her ear. The voice on the other end was a woman's Rice. On the other end was a woman's, sir. Hello, is this Hannah? Yes, this is Hannah, she answered slowly. There was a pause. I'm calling from a nearby country, the voice continued. My name is Evelyn. I'm Jacob's cousin. At the sound of Jacob's name, Hannah froze. Her eyes filled with tears instantly. She hadn't heard that name in so long. I've been trying this number for over a year, the woman said. It was always off. I only got through today. Hannah didn't speak. She held her breath, listening. My cousin Jacob came into the country the same day he left you, the woman said gently. There was an accident, a bad one. He never made it home. Hannah held her chest. Her heart felt heavy. He was in a coma for 4 months, the woman went on. He never woke up. He passed away quietly. A long silence filled the line. I saw the messages you sent him, Evelyn added. I saw the love in your words. I knew he was serious about you. Hannah wiped her face. She didn't know what to say. From the messages, I believe there's a child, the woman said softly. Is there? Yes, Hannah whispered. Her name is Julia. She is his daughter, the woman said, her voice breaking. The woman on the phone let out a deep sigh. She couldn't hide it anymore. Jacob's mother is still alive, she said. She's very old now. She cries every day. She thinks Jacob left this world without saying goodbye, but now there's hope. Hannah took a deep breath and spoke with calm strength. Don't worry, she said. I'll make arrangements to bring Julia to Secret in Down. I'll do everything I can to make it happen. The woman on the other end began to cry softly. Thank you, she said. After the call ended, Hannah sat alone in the small office. Tears rolled down her cheeks, not tears of pain, but tears of peace. For so long, she had lived with questions, with silence. But now, she knew the truth. Jacob didn't abandon her. He never came back because he couldn't. He was already fighting for his life. Hannah had finally found closure, and now her daughter, Juju, Judal. Hannah had finally found closure, and now her daughter, Juju. Days later, Dominic and Salem stopped by the supermarket. They saw Hannah smiling again, this time from deep within. Dominic placed his hand on her shoulder. You're strong, he said. She was strong because even though life had tried to break her, she stood up again. Not with hate or anger, but with hope. And with that, a new chapter began for Hannah and her daughter, Julia. Real wealth isn't found in money, but in how we treat those who can't pay. Real wealth isn't found in money, but in how we treat those who can't pay. And even when life seems unfair, don't give up. Sometimes the help you need is watching you, quietly ready to show up when you least expect it. Also, never judge people by what they're going through. Everyone has a story, and with just one act of kindness, you can become the turning point in someone's life. Now, tell me, what did you learn from Hannah's story? Was there a moment that made you cry or smile? Let me know in the comments section. I would love comments section. I would love Forty. I would love section. I would love Formosa. It's deep, emotional, and full of unexpected twists. So please subscribe to my channel and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss it. If this story touched you, don't forget to like the video and share it with your friends and family. Thank you so much for watching. I truly appreciate it. See you in the next one.